Hi girls, gays, and theys. My name is Jess, and welcome back to my channel, Books Past Bedtime. So, as you may or may not have noticed, I have been on about a 5-month hiatus for the majority of 2023. So that means I have not filmed a single wrap-up all year. So we're really due for this video. Since I have last filmed a wrap-up, I have read a total of 54 books. That has been from January 2023 to May 2023. I figure some of you might be interested in what I have been up to, what I've been reading, when I've been gone, so that is what this video is. Because this video is going to include so many books, I am not going to go into a full synopsis for all of them. Some of them I might talk about a little more than others, just depends on what I have to say. But the goal is to make this a pretty rapid fire video because I don't want to be here for 5 hours. I know you don't want to be here for 5 hours. So we're going to try and get through this list of 54 books as quickly as possible. And to kind of help you figure out my feelings on these books, I have roughly ranked them from worst to best. If you made me do this ranking on a different day, it would probably be in a slightly different order, but the bottoms are definitely the bottoms and the tops are definitely the tops, if you get my drift. So let's just jump right into it. On the bottom of the pile is The Alpha's Gamble by Elliot Grayson. This is an Alpha Omega book in a series that I have mostly liked, but this book I definitely did not like. But if you like dubcon between two alpha holes that takes the form of blackmail, this book might be the book for you, but if you are sane like me, this will be your easiest DNF of the year. Next on my list is another DNF, and that is Tough Luck by Annabeth Albert. This book wasn't as offensive to me as The Alpha's Gamble was, but it was very boring. Don't get me wrong, I love an age gap, bodyguard, size difference, kink, romance as much as the next girl, but this one just didn't hit. It was boring and slow. Took me a long time to get into it, and I didn't feel like fighting to get into it any longer, so I did DNF it at like the halfway point. Next, The Devil Takes by Faye Quinn. This is another book where if you're looking for kink with zero relationship development or really even a single conversation before we jump right into the hardcore of it, this might be the book for you. Needless to say, I need at least a stoplight system established before we get into that kind of kink, so this book was not for me. Next is Cold War by Kira Andrews, and as an enemies to lovers ice skating romance written by the queen herself, Kira Andrews. I really thought that this one was going to be a hit, and I was sadly mistaken. I ended up DNFing this one because much like Tough Luck, it was slow and boring. I believe that this was written in shorts or like serially, and it was one of Kira Andrews' first books, so I will cut her a little bit of slack, but it was a very disjointed reading experience. The timeline jumped all over the place. There was no real cohesion to the story, and so I really struggled to get into it. I was really going to try and push through for my girl Kira, but I decided I didn't want to put myself through that, so I did end up DNFing this book as well. Hurricane by Laura Taylor is the first book in this video that I actually finished. I do kind of wish that I hadn't finished it. This is an Omegaverse romance set in space, which is maybe should have been my indicator that this was not going to be a hit, but I persisted nonetheless. I thought it was going to be good. Don't get me wrong, I don't just like those kinds of things, but I think altogether it just didn't work for me. In this book, the two main characters are kind of forced together when they go into heat, when they have been trapped on this abandoned spaceship or space station in the middle of nowhere with no other people around. They're trapped there because this big storm is happening. This just was a lot darker and less like romantic and sexy than I thought it was going to be. It really was kind of like icky. It made me feel gross. So this was, needless to say, not the book for me. Wed to the Omega by Ash Moon was a book that I read as a palate cleanser after a book I really liked and before reading another book that I thought I was really gonna like. Sometimes I do that to try and combat the book hangover affliction. And it must have worked for this book because this was definitely a palate cleanser in that I literally remember nothing about it. Couldn't even tell you the names of the two main characters if my life depended on it. I gave it 2 stars though, so I must not have liked it very much. We really are getting all the Omegaverse out of the way at the beginning of this list. Maybe since this is all on the bottom, it should be a indicator to me that I should stop reading it because I don't like it very much. Will I stop? No, absolutely not. The next book though is called Thick Omega by Hope May, and this is as trashy and ridiculous as it sounds. It follows Mac, who is very much not like the other Omegas. He is big and thick and not delicate at all, which means he is not very attractive to most of the other alphas, but he does happen to be the perfect Omega for Delta, and now it's just up to Delta to convince Mac that he is worth his love. I feel like this book could have been better if it was written better. It was written really poorly though, so it was just a mess. Next is Alpha's Kiss by Shannon West. This is another Omegaverse romance. And it also had the arranged marriage trope, which I personally love, but this book was closed door. What's the point of writing a closed door ABO romance? I will never understand. So yeah, didn't like this one. Next are two books, but they are so similar that I'm going to talk about them together, and that is Ryder and Lucas by Jackie James. And listen, sometimes I just need a stupid, ridiculous, age gap, slutty, daddy kink romance in between more serious selections of books. And that is what these were. Were they well written? No. Did I enjoy them particularly? No. Will I probably read more books like this in the future? Absolutely yes. Next is Only One Coffin by A.J. Truman. This is another ridiculous book, but this one is like more fun, campy ridiculous than stupid ridiculous. It is very trope happy. It is a romance between a grumpy vampire and a sunshiny vampire, and due to a mix-up in hotel bookings, they have to share a coffin while on vacation. This is the grumpy vampire's worst nightmare, but he cannot help but fall for the sunshiny vampire throughout the course of their vacation. And it was as over the top as the description makes it seem, but it was definitely a fun time and a good laugh. No Rings Attached by Rachel Lacey was a very meh read. I really enjoyed the first book in this series, which is like a companion. This book follows friends of the main characters from the first book, and it promised a fun fake dating setup, but the fake dating only lasted about 20% of the book, which was very disappointing to me. And then the rest of the book was spent on this weird, like somber road trip around the US. It was really strange in tone and very strange in plot, and I did not like the romance. I didn't like the way the characters treated one another. I thought it was kind of icky. And yeah, this book was just a letdown and a very like middle of the road, maybe a lower middle kind of read. Another middle of the road disappointing sapphic romance was Sorry Bro by Taylene Voskuni. And if you want to read a book about the messiest main character in existence who makes absolutely horrible decisions and hurts all the people around her very, very badly, you can read this book. Sadly, I don't like that kind of thing, so it was really not the book for me. The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager is narrated by a washed-up alcoholic actress, never been done before, I know, who sees more than she should and comes to some wild conclusions after spying on her neighbors across the lake. It was a fast-paced read, and I was solidly on board at the beginning, as I am with most Riley Sagers, but when the twist happened in this book, it was very strange. It threw me off a lot, and it made me not like the story anymore. I really didn't like the twist. I thought it was really dumb. Next are, again, two books that I'm going to talk about together, and that is because they are a duology, and that is Empire of Sand and A Realm of Ash by Tasha Suri. I read these for the Fantasy Series Book Club this year. They weren't my cup of tea. I thought that they were well written and unique, and I liked the magic system, and the characters were serviceable, but I think that is the best way to describe this duology is serviceable. It is not a bad read by any means, but it's not memorable. It didn't really make me feel much of anything. I was really okay putting it down between reading sessions, reading it slowly. It didn't capture my attention or make me want to sit down and binge it. So yeah, middle of the road. This one is for sure. Also, a middle of the road read was The Hellions Waltz by Olivia Waite. This one really disappointed me because I loved The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics. It's one of my favorite sapphic romances of all time. So another sapphic historical romance by Olivia Waite I felt like was sure to be a winner, but this one was sadly not. The romance was sweet, and I enjoyed that Sophie and Maddie were able to be open about their relationship with the people they loved despite the historical time period. But ultimately, it was a forgettable read. Far from forgettable, though, was It's Not Unusual to Be Loved by an Alien by Chloe Archer. This is another ridiculous male-male romance book that I read this year. It's a silly book about a romance between a human who's obsessed with discovering aliens and an alien that he does happen to discover. The main character was annoying at times, and I feel like the way that this book was written with its pop culture references and catchphrases will definitely feel dated when read in even a year or two. Also, the tentacles were surprisingly underutilized, but this book was kind of a fun time and something a little bit different to read, so I definitely did not hate it. Another average read was The Holiday Trap by Roan Parrish. This one had middling reviews, so I was not anticipating a lot when I went into it, and so I pleasantly surprised by the reading experience. I overall enjoyed this one, even though it wasn't something I would write home about. It follows two different characters, Truman and Greta, as they do a house swap for the holidays and their subsequent romances in the new towns that they're in. I didn't love Greta's romance and storyline. I liked Greta as a character, but I didn't like her love interest, whereas I really did like Truman and his love interest. interest and thought their romance was really sweet and cute. This was just like a fluffy, fun, like holiday kind of read. And overall, it was cute, above average. I liked it quite a bit. I also thought the audiobook was really well done. One Night in Heartswood by Emma Denny is a historical male-male romance. I really thought I was going to absolutely love this one, and so when I didn't, I was a little bit let down, although I did enjoy it. It is set in Oxford in 1360 and employs the anonymous trope to its full capacity. Raph and Pen meet under mysterious circumstances in the forest and have like an instant spark, an instant connection, and agree to travel together, even though Raph is on a journey to find the elusive groom that ran away from marrying his sister, while Pen is running to escape a marriage that was thrust upon them. Neither of them know each other's identities and how that their lives are already intertwined, and they like fall in love along the journey. While the setup was like right up my alley, it really drug in the middle, which is surprising considering this book is relatively short. It's barely 300 pages, if even that. And it didn't have the strongest writing or plot. Like, it was good and it was cute, but it wasn't magnificent. Next is a group of 6 books that I'm gonna all talk about together because they are all very similar and by the same author, and that is Devoted, Ugly, Trouble, Teacher, Unexpected, and Innocent, all by Ro Horvat. These are all Omegaverse romance books, and a lot better than a lot of the other ones on this list, as you probably know from the placement. But these are definitely opposite of Closed Door. So I would actually consider these erotic rather than romances, but they're actually like really good. Despite being filthy, they are a lot of fun and actually have really good characters. Ro Horvat is a trans author and I really enjoy how they play with gender in their books. I think it's super interesting. Takes like a new unique spin on the Omegaverse trope, which I think is why I like these books a lot more than some of the others that I have read this year. And of these books, Trouble is probably my most favorite book. It's a friends to lovers romance between a porn star and his best friend who convinces him that they are in love by auditioning to be in one of his porns. Like I said, filthy, absolutely filthy, but that one in particular is so freaking sweet and cute. I loved it. If this is your kind of thing, I would definitely recommend these. They're really good for what they are. Next on my list is Step Bully by Willow Dixon. I have read quite a few Willow Dixon books this year, but this is my least favorite of the ones that I have read. As you can probably tell from the title, this is a stepbrothers, bully, enemies, lovers sort of romance, but for a romance where the 2 main characters are literally stepbrothers and literally share a half-sister, there was a surprising lack of taboo elements in this book, which is fine, but not what I was expecting, not what I was wanting, if I can say that without being a psycho. This is one of those books where I'm not sure I'm glad that I read it, but it was entertaining nonetheless. Slippery Creatures by KJ Charles is a historical romance and mystery combo. While it was an entertaining read while I was reading it, it was another book that was ultimately forgettable. I know I really liked it while I was reading, but the plot definitely did not stick with me. The characters definitely did not stick with me, which is kind of a problem because I think this is a series. Expert by Alessandra Hazard is also a book in a series. I've been waiting for this book for almost a year, so once it finally came out, I was so excited to read it, and honestly, it kind of let me down. The age gap and taboo nature of crushing on your hot older doctor definitely did it for me. But the third act conflict and the amount of time it actually took for these two to like officially get together really grated on my nerves and made me not like the book as much. Yeah, I liked it, but it definitely is not one of my best reads of the year. Next is The King's Delight by Sarah Honey. This book starts when Felix, the new royal groom, mistakes Leo, who is the king of the whole country, for a horse thief and tries to seduce him. Thus sparks a little romance between the two, and their arrangement is all fun and games. Right until they both fall hard and fast. They have to navigate a visiting princess, an assassination attempt, and a kidnapping if they want to find out if what they have can last. This was a cute, kind of really short story. It's like 200 pages just, I believe. It was definitely a fun, slightly kinky time, would recommend. Next, The Anonymous Hookup by Jax Calder. This is a solid, sweet romance about 2 men who agree to a completely anonymous hookup, but then experience an unforgettable connection and keep coming back to one another. A cute, hot, steamy, quick read. Another cute, hot, steamy, quick read is Twice Bitten by Elliot Grayson. Yes, the same author of the book that is absolutely last on my list. Generally, I like this author. That one book just didn't work for me. The tropes in the DubCon was just a big no for me, but this one I did like. This book follows vampire enforcer Angelo and the tall, dark, brooding alpha that he has to team up with in order to solve this mystery of Jack, who is the tall, dark, brooding alpha. His murderous mates on some kind of rampage. They have to come together and stop them and fall in love along the way. This is basically a paranormal fated mates romance, and it was really cute. I liked it a lot. Next is Care by Aaron Hawke. I picked this book up wanting like Monstrous by Lily Mayne kind of vibes. It was nowhere near as good as that series, but it definitely gave me a similar vibe. This is a paranormal romance between a lovable human and a secretive fae who's not as detached as he pretends to be. It was well written, and I definitely fell in love with both Luca and Care by the end of the story. The world created was also super interesting and unique. This is a series. I'm not sure I'm planning to continue on with it, but I might, as this one was pretty good. Next, Runtime by Catherine Ryan Howard. This is another of the handful of thrillers that I've read this year. This is a psychological thriller following Adele, who is kind of a washed-up actress who is out of work, so she jumps at the opportunity when this new horror movie, Final Draft, falls into her lap despite all of the red flags surrounding it. And as she goes to star in this movie, she discovers that most of the real horror lies off the page. This was a solid, really smartly written thriller that I definitely enjoyed, but ultimately I really wanted it to be scarier. It didn't quite go where I wanted it to go, you know? And right next to it is another book by Catherine Ryan Howard, and that is The Nothing Man. This is a thriller from the perspective of a serial killer, which was a super cool and unique way to read a thriller. I really enjoyed that. And it is also a book within a book. So basically the serial killer is reading a book that is written by one of the only people to ever survive one of his attacks. And the author of this book is really trying to uncover his true identity and getting closer and closer as the book goes on. This was a wild ride and a super fun time, and I did like it slightly better than Runtime, even though I think that they are both very smartly written, unique, good time thrillers, you know? Another thriller that I read this year was The Last Word by Taylor Adams. After posting a negative book review, a woman who is living in a very remote location begins to wonder if the author is just a little touchy or actually very, very dangerous and hunting her down. This is definitely a pulse-pounding psychological suspense horror and was a much better follow-up, in my opinion, to No Exit than Hairpin Bridge was. Next is Paladin by Only James. This is a new series from one of my favorite MM authors. It's a spinoff of the Necessary Evil series and follows the pseudo family of Jericho, one of the characters and love interests from the first series. These boys are no stranger to vigilante justice, just like the Mulvaneys, and so our main character Arson meets Ever on a job. Thus follows a twisted, fucked up, dark romance with lots of hurt comfort, possessive main characters, and a side of steamy sex. This isn't a new favorite of mine from Only, but I did really enjoy it. I feel like it was a little bit more rushed rating and plot-wise than some of her other books. I did really enjoy it, and I liked the dynamic between Ever and Arson quite a lot, but yeah, it was lacking a little bit plot-wise, I thought. Tommy Cabot Was Here by Cat Sebastian is probably one of the best second chance romances I've ever read. I really liked it a lot. It's a sweet, short, male-male romance set in the 1950s academia and really solid. Really liked it a lot. Would very much recommend. Never Have I Ever Punched My Roommate's V-Card is the next Willow Dixon book on this list. It's a friends to lovers romance, and sparks fly when Beck accidentally walks in on Finn pleasuring himself. But Beck is straight, so why can he not stop thinking about his roommate? Very good stuff, very cute. Next, Mistakes Were Made by Meryl Wilsner. Even though I'd heard so many good things about this book, I was still very hesitant going into it because I really wasn't sure how I would feel about a romance between a girl and her best friend's mom. I don't know how to explain my limits to you guys, but this felt like a limit to me. But I read it and I actually was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. It definitely still isn't my favorite trope, but I did really enjoy it in this story and thought it was done well and delicately, and the romance was super hot and sweet. So Girl 11 by Amy Suter Clark is probably my favorite of the thrillers that I've read this year. I haven't read that many, but I did really like this one. It was fast-paced and chillingly realistic, and it follows a lawyer who, I think she's a lawyer, or she's a podcaster, and she's trying to solve the case of this killer whose MO was kidnapping young girls, each a year younger than the year before, as kind of like a countdown of sorts. And our main character is racing the clock, trying to stop the next girl from being taken and solve the case. And this was really well written. I really liked it a lot. The amount of diversity among the characters in this story was unmatched in thrillers. I feel like that's not really a focus of thrillers very often. So I appreciated that it was a focus of this thriller. This author also focused on talking about how minority groups are adversely affected by the system and how their cases get so little media coverage and attention. And I really liked that the author pointed that out as well. And really think that more thriller authors and true crime outlets should be talking about that kind of thing. So I really appreciated that and enjoyed that aspect of the book, as well as just the overall like thrillerness of the book. I thought it was really well done and I liked it a lot. Next on my list is Exasperating by Only James. Look, sometimes I just need to reread a trashy romance between an alpha hole and a crybaby twink, okay? Sue me. Next is the most recent book I finished, and that is Ophelia After All by Raquel Marie. This is like a perfect queer coming of age story. I loved it so much more than I even thought I would. It follows Ophelia as she navigates senior year and the pressure of dealing with people's expectations of her and trying to carve out a place for herself in the world and trying to understand who she is as a person and come to terms with her newly discovered sexuality. This book had so many good pieces to it. I really loved it, thought it was super well written and engaging. Ophelia's story is really gonna stick with me for a while. I was really impressed with this one. I loved it a lot. Savage Rivals by Becca Steele was another comfort reread for me. This is an enemies to lovers high school football romance. Football as in soccer. The reason I read this one again this year was because I saw a TikTok that talked about the who did this to you trope. This book has a scene in there which has like my favorite who did this to you scene ever in it, so I had to reread it obviously. Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake is a female-female romance between Astrid and Jordan who butt heads after being paired to work together on an HGTV renovation show. I really loved the antagonistic dynamic between the two and also really appreciated watching Astrid come to terms with her queerness later in life. I feel like that's some representation we do not often see and I really loved and appreciated it. Also, the sex scenes were hot. I wish there were more. Next is A Complicated Love Story Set in Space by Sean David Hutchinson. This was really such a great read. It follows three teens who are trapped on a crumbling, dying spaceship with no memory of how they got there, and they must band together to try and save themselves and perhaps the universe as well. Sean David Hutchinson always slays way harder than I think he's going to. I don't know why. I should learn by now that his books are good, but this one was really good. I liked it a lot. The ending though was crazy and I still don't know what to think about it. Never Have I Ever Submitted to My Enemy by Willow Dixon. You might be wondering why this is so high on the list when it appears to be a trashy romance book, and that is because it is a fucking good trashy romance book, okay? Okay. It includes two of my absolute favorite tropes, and that is obviously enemies to lovers and also the anonymous trope where the two hate each other in real life but are also talking online but don't know that it's the same person. I love that shit. I love it. The reveal in this book when they finally figure out that these two people are the same is so good. It is so good. I fucking love it. The writing was immaculate. The sex was hot and spicy. The perfect amount of kink. I loved it so much. But also like the conversations and emotions that the two had throughout the story just like jumped off the page and really made it feel real. And I don't know, I loved this book so much. Can't explain why. I just did, okay? Count Your Lucky Stars by Alexandria Bellafleur is another book that I absolutely loved. But after reading the absolute dumpster fire that was Hang the Moon, I was very hesitant to go into this book. But thankfully it did not follow in the footsteps of Hang the Moon and was actually really good. I really think Alexandria should stick to writing sapphic romances because that is where her strength lies. And really, we do not need more straight romances in the world. So yeah, Hang the Moon, meh. But Count Your Lucky Stars is an A+ for me. Prince and Pawn by Tavia Lark is the conclusion to one of my favorite queer fantasy series of all time. It follows Corinne and Audric, who have a anonymous hookup the night before Audric is supposed to be introduced to his betrothed. His betrothed just happens to be Corinne's older brother, and they discover this when Corinne shows up to the castle and sees Audric. Yeah. This series is seriously unmatched. The fantasy world is so rich and lovely. The characters are incredible. The writing is immaculate. I really wish more people would read this series. So if you've been waiting for a sign, this is your sign. All right, now we're into our top 5 books of the year so far. So get ready. Number 5 is Lore by Lily Mayne. This is the 7th installment in Lily Mayne's Monstrous series, which I absolutely love. This book is posed as almost a prequel to the entire series. It probably falls somewhere in the middle, maybe towards the lower half of my ranking of the entire series, but that's not to say I didn't love this book, because I really did. The romance between Laura and Jugs was so sweet and pure. I loved it so much, but my favorite part of the book was probably getting so much like background information and context and explanation as to the world and why it is the way it is. And so many like connections were made. I just thought it was so fascinating and I loved it, and I can't wait for the next book. Please give it to me soon, Lily. Please, 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 please. Number 4 is Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed. I feel like it's kind of unfair to put a reread so high up on my list, but this book is really that good. It was so fun coming back to Shane and Ilya's story after over a year since I first read the book. It's one of the true classics of the hockey romance genre, and I love it so much. It literally has everything you could ever want. A rival to lovers, secret romance, characters who hate to love one another, amazing banter, hot chemistry, real stakes. This book is literally amazing. Probably the biggest upset, the biggest shocking addition to this top 5 is 6 Times We Almost Kissed and the One Time We Did by Tess Sharp. When I first picked this book up, I was really expecting just a cute enemies to lovers YA rom-com, but this book was so much more than that, and it took me by complete surprise. It was emotionally layered, dealt with so many difficult topics. The complex familial relationships were done so well in this book, as were the discussions of trauma and therapy and healing. All these things added so much to the overall reading experience while not taking away from the sweet sapphic romance that was at the core of this story. And the way these two were always there for one another and cared so much about each other and were always on one another's teams was just the best thing ever. Oh my god, I loved it so much. This book made me cry, it made me laugh. I have so many pictures of quotes from when I was reading the book because it was a library book and I couldn't write in it. Literally so good. I loved it a lot. The number 2 book on this list that I thought was going to be the number 1 book on this list until May is Kiss Your Once For Me by Alison Cochrane. And before I read this book, I would have told you that I didn't like second chance romances, but I really must have been reading the wrong second chance romances, because this one was fucking incredible. It is literally one of my favorite romances of all time. I still, to this day, have such a crush on Jack, and I will probably be rereading this book every Christmas for the rest of my life. Alison Cochrane is like my favorite author of all time. I love this book more than life itself, but I don't love it enough to put it number 1 on this list, because number 1 on this list is reserved for In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. The best book I will read this year. I really do not believe that anything will top that. I feel it in my heart of hearts that I will not read a better book than this year. I think it will be impossible, honestly. This book follows Vic, who is a human living among sentient machines, who he loves like his family, and one day, Vic in the scrapyard finds Hap, who he repairs back to life, and this sets off a strange string of events that lead Vic to uncovering dark secrets about the world that he lives in and the people around him. This is an insanely creative, insanely hysterical, insanely well-written story. It was heartfelt, it left me sobbing, I laughed out loud reading it. It was so beautiful and perfect and wonderful. It also has asexual representation. I love. Oh my god. I love this book with all of my heart. I want everyone to read it. It was literally by far the best book I've read this year. Like, I can't imagine reading a better book. It was so good. So good. So good. Oh, it was like the perfect book for me. I loved it so much. And those were all 54 books that I have read so far in 2023, ranked from worst to best. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what the best and worst book you've read so far this year would be in the comments down below. I would love to know. Also, you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Goodreads, all the social media linked down below. I will not be linking every book that I've talked about in this video down below like I usually do, because that is just too much work. But if you would like to hear more about what books I read in the future, definitely subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you. This is a safe and happy place for everyone. You can also like this video if you liked it and leave a comment to support the channel. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.